Good morning.
How's it going?
Oh, good. Lots of stuff doing.
It's good, probably.
Yeah.
You letting your hair grow back out, or you just haven't got back out to the
Oh yeah, I'm going seeing how long it will grow. Going wild.
Hey, how's it going, Brian?
Hey man, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Awesome.
What's going on, Nick? This is Dylan. I was on the call with you guys the other day with Brian. We were looking at that NF tables module.
Hey, Dylan.
What's up?
So now you get to see my beautiful face.
It is.
All right. Well, I don't think that we have a particular agenda, mostly because I didn't do the proper thing and announce this like a week out. I dropped it late last night. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, we got the working group meeting today. Um, so Tyler, I'm not sure if you've made much progress on item AWS. We could probably go over some of that stuff that's maybe changed in the last month since our last meeting. And we have Brian and Dylan on the call, who I was talking to last week, and they were interested in some of the stuff that you have going on with item AWS and then other general cloud stuff inside of POP and item. So um, maybe we could talk a little bit about, the types of things that are still on that list. I think we had that spreadsheet kicking around out there, Tyler, where we
Yeah.
were like carving out different modules and things like that, and what's still to do out there, and maybe go over the item cloud GitLab Kanban too, just like so people know what's out there and we're targeting for the future. Does that sound like a good thing to do?
Sure. Let me get
Awesome.
those ready.
Then I can kick back and drink my beer while Tyler's doing all the hard work because he's awesome.
Thank you. Well, for item AWS, I've been actually blocked on it because I'm trying to get a grains binary that we can just and bootstrapping salt figured out. So that's where I'm stuck. Is as soon as we can get bootstrapping salt figured out for item cloud, then we'll be able to just take off.
What
And
what does that mean? Sorry.
No problem. So in Salt Cloud, right, we have the ability to bootstrap minions. And what that really means is that if deploy equals true, what it's going to do is tell that system that it just spun up via Salt Cloud that it needs to download the Salt Bootstrap script and run it to install the minion. And it also passes some variables, which are basically the minion keys, so that it can precede on the minion side, and then it follows up at the end and accepts the minion key on the master side. So essentially, what you can do with Salt Cloud is spin up a new minion that's automatically connected and can then be orchestrated and all that good stuff after the fact. So that's kind of what Tyler is working on, because we had talked. Was it during the last cloud working group meeting, Tyler, that we had talked about this, or was one of those other
yeah,
meetings?
I think it was
Um,
in that working group meeting.
okay, so we just talked about like the things that are different between where we are right now with item and what's available natively in Salt Cloud, right? So like item Azure RM is more feature complete than Salt Cloud or any of the Azure modules inside of Salt right now,
Minus.
um, minus bootstrapping. That's really the only thing that we can't do right now, um, and that's just by nature of like not being tied into Salt, right? Like it's a separate thing. Um, so we're gonna see how far we could get with that.
Did you guys already look into like CloudFormation and all that standard stuff, or?
So what item is a different language entirely to sort of draw out what your infrastructure is going to look like. So leveraging CloudFormation is a lot like saying, I'm going to use CloudFormation instead of this. So it's kind of
Okay, gotcha.
counter to the point.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, I know that a lot of this, it would probably be better sometimes to like have a whiteboard and be able to like sketch stuff out. Like here's the relationship between things. So it definitely slows down if we start talking about things that don't make sense.
Gotcha.
So Tyler, you're blocked on the bootstrapping side. Where were you with Item AWS prior to getting that far? Like, had you implemented states for all the things that you took on initially?
Oh yeah, for everything, for creating, for the present and absent states, for pretty much every resource inside of AWS, we've got a lot of coverage there. There's still more that can be done for like ECS and a lot more coverage and being able to update all the images. For example, we can create instances and destroy instances, but you can't like change the VPCs of an active instance. So
Okay.
that's the next step where we're at with AWS.
Okay,
And if anyone
so
wants to jump on board with that, then I'd be happy to show exactly where the work needs to be done and what to do.
let's see here. I think that's it. So Tyler,
Another thing to bring up is a Salsa employee last week picked up Item Cloud and did Item LXD for LXD containers and was able to wrap the whole thing in an hour. So if anyone wants to do a smaller cloud, like AWS is a huge beast to handle, but if you want to get experience with Item Cloud and you want to do like Tencent Cloud or Linode, or maybe not Linode is a small one, but you know.
yeah, Linode, the services are expanding.
Yeah. But if you
Plus,
want to small cloud,
those
it'd
guys
be-
might do it themselves. So let's see here. So Tyler dropped some links, this being one of them. Is this still accurate, Tyler?
yeah, to the last where we went on it.
Okay, so let's see.
You wanted to do all the a bunch of the EC2 stuff, and if anyone else wants to jump in and kind of, the point of the spreadsheet is we wanted to say who wanted to be the manager of these different modules, so that one person wasn't like expected to do everything for EC2.
And this, to be clear, is just the services that currently have coverage inside of Salt. This isn't a list of every AWS service.
Right.
So if there is something out there that's not on this list that's important to you, it can certainly be added. This is editable by anyone with a link. So go ahead and grab whatever you want and sort of, you know, take ownership of that. You know, like there's no EKS in here or anything like that. So Tyler, since we have some new folks on, can you go over like the structure of Item AWS right quick? Because I know there's some like fancy things in there that you did, especially with contracts that are going to be much different for people that are jumping in.
Yes. Let me get to looking at the repo. And since there's so many new people, I'm gonna post this one again. This is the Pop Awesome. And on the Pop Awesome repo, I have posted links for Azure RM or for Pop and for Item Cloud. Every meeting we've ever talked about Item Cloud or Item AWS, I've compiled a list of like every article Nick's written, every presentation anyone has given anywhere is all right there in a sensical order. So if you're looking for something to watch or read through to get a clear understanding of how we got to where we're at, that will also be a good starting point.
And Tyler, that was the Pop Awesome link?
Yeah, the very last one.
Yep, I got it up. Thank you.
Looks cool. Yeah, I see a bunch of the articles and stuff and podcast links and everything.
Yeah, it's a great place to start.
Like, I think Brian was on, it was probably several months ago at this point, a call when we were talking about item and what it's capable of. But
Maybe January, February. It was a while back.
yeah,
Where the world
Dylan.
basically changed.
Exactly. Dylan, did you have any sort of like backstory about kind of what we're trying to do with item, or kind of what like pop is and things like that?
Pretty vague. I feel like I could probably use a refresher on most of it. I guess with pop, I guess I know the high level is we did join a meetup with Thomas Hatch once actually, and he kind of went through it. So I mean, I know like very high level. You know, I know it's kind of a new paradigm, sort of challenging. Just standard object-oriented programming. It's trying to build, I guess, kind of like almost like a global namespace, I guess, where you can just, drop in a new piece of code, new plugin, and it should just kind of work effectively. But that's my just very basic, super high level understanding at this point.
So you were in that Python meetup where we had Tom come in?
Yeah, I guess
Awesome.
that was probably March or something.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, so that had a really good overview of kind of what like pop is trying to solve for, right? But where the rubber meets the road is, taking all of the things that are awesome about Salt, which is already a pluggable system, but really trying to take those and airlift them into their own pop applications. And what item represents, if you were to try and draw a corollary, is kind of like Salt's state system. So, idempotent enforcement of state of a thing is what item is really expected to solve. And so, there's a ton of state modules currently in Salt that if we wanted to replicate all of the functionality that's there, it would take forever, right? So we had to start somewhere. And the easiest thing that doesn't have a bunch of ties into other modules, right? So like, it seems like every state module or execution module has ties back to the file module in some way, right? Or other like really basic or operating system specific modules. So if we just focus on cloud, right? There's these APIs that we're working against. All of the cloud stuff that's currently in the Salt code base is at least somewhat dated, just because it can only release at the cadence of Salt. So new services are being deployed all the time. And it's really difficult to keep up with that. So cloud things in general are a really, really good use case for moving them into item. And so, there are currently cloud states. So like I'll talk a lot about Azure because I was the guy who wrote them in both Salt and item. But there's a ton of Salt states that do Azure things, right? Like creating virtual networks, resource groups, all of those things. And we moved those, or copied them rather, into item Azure RM, and now we can do stateful enforcement of those same objects in item. But as far as instance creation, right, like creating virtual machines in Salt, that's taken care of by Salt Cloud. That's where all of your virtual machine creation takes place. There's no Azure states for creating a virtual machine because it's expected to be done inside of Salt Cloud. So in item, it just becomes another state, right? You can spin up n number of virtual machines using a virtual machine creation state and create them there. So the last mile to get where we need to be with Salt Cloud as we stated before, is going to be the bootstrapping process, tying it into, installing a minion and tying it into Assault Master. But a lot of that functionality at this point has been duplicated into item, and now we're moving on to other clouds. With AWS being the first big one, we had some. What was that? Item vert or item libvert? Which one? Item vert.
Libvert was one that we were toying with for a while.
Yeah, Cedric was doing that. I don't know what state it's in right now.
Blocks and maybe another one, but
yeah. So there's a few of the smaller ones that. Where's the? You put the Kanban
really
board in there.
My experiments before tackling AWS. So if you have interest in those repos, they could definitely use some love.
I'm not a GitLab guy. Where's the Kanban board on GitLab for item?
I shared the link. It's the second to last link that I shared.
Boards. Sweet. Okay. So let me share this real quick, because this is like an overview of the different clouds. So at this point, I don't know. I think the last meeting we were finishing this up, but Item Azure RM actually has full coverage for the states. Tyler, do you suppose that's good enough to move it out of needs tests at this point?
It's up to you.
Because I don't know. I mean, if you ask me,
module, so
what's that?
Because the states call all the execution modules.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Full coverage.
Yeah, the only thing that we really could add at this point is I could maybe write some unit tests around. There's like a couple of helper functions in like a utils file. You can maybe do a unit test or two around that, but other than that, I think that the tests are really done for Item Azure RM. But Item VirtualBox, Vagrant, and Vulture, Tyler liked the V's and knocked those out. So there's some functionality out there in these respective repositories where you could spin up a VirtualBox virtual machine on your system and sort of test that without a external cloud. Or if you went and got a Vulture account, you could do that there.
That's actually what's the best about Item AWS is you don't need legitimate credentials to get started. You can do it all with local stack on your own machine.
Also true. And did you document that somewhere? I forget where.
Yeah, it's in the README for the Item AWS repo.
Cool.
Yeah,
Local
if you
stack.
follow that line by line, you should be good to go for testing everything.
So Item AWS is in progress right now, but then there's all these other guys over here that would really be great things that people take advantage of inside of Salt that are probably going to need some coverage inside of some item cloud repository. And really, when it comes down to any of these, you kind of need to know a little bit about it or use it on a regular basis in order to do it. But you can certainly spin up in a short amount of time if you're eager to learn a specific cloud. DigitalOcean is maybe a good one to get started, and it's like probably medium sized in the number of APIs that you have to deal with. VMware is probably going to be a big one, but it has a huge amount of use in the Salt community. So I think that there would be a lot of need for that in the future. These guys will probably make their own if we can get in contact with them and show them some value in it.
I'm planning on doing that as soon as we have bootstrapping.
Yeah. But that's kind of what's on the plate, on the agenda for creating individual repositories for individual clouds and being able to spin up those resources in them. So when it comes down to how that actually works, if you have any specific questions, we're all active in the POP channel or Item Cloud channel in Slack for Salt. And then if you get in touch with Tyler, and he's not busy, sometimes he has some cycles to be able to help people through things with individual struggles as they're looking to implement some of these things here. So that's kind of where we are, where we're headed at a super high level. But I think it's a really good cause, I guess. Just mostly because it's going to allow all of this cloud code to get the heck out of Salt and move much faster in individual repositories and keep up with the clouds themselves. Because we can't be tied to a distinct release cycle that we might have to wait a quarter or a half of a year in order to get cloud changes. And when some new service got spun up yesterday, and if I'm using this as my infrastructure as code platform, that could become problematic.
And actually, I don't know if we mentioned it in the last cloud meeting, but you can run item states from within Salt as of the Magnesium release that's coming out in a week or two. So I think that's our next step too for ditching Salt Cloud, is as soon as we can run Item Cloud from Salt, we're done, or we're good.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, the workflow that a lot of people have for cloud things inside of Salt is to run an orchestration state that uses Salt states to spin up the infrastructure, right? So like if I'm spinning up, a virtual machine in Azure, I need a resource group, I need a virtual network at minimum, and a subnet within that virtual network in order to move forward. Salt Cloud can spin up the network interface and the public IP associated with my virtual machine by setting different flags. So at minimum, we're going to need that small amount of infrastructure beforehand. So what people will do is run an orchestration state that runs those states first. The infrastructure is then in place, and then it calls the Salt Cloud map run or profile creation, and we'll then spin up the virtual machines that tie into those resources. So how do you envision that tie-in for using the Salt, I guess the item modules inside of Salt all in one? Because like bootstrapping a minion, that'll get the minion software in place. You're going to find some way to inject the keys and accept on the master side, all inside of that process, or is that going to be as part of like a larger orchestration where you can run the states and then you'd have to come back to like the wheel module or something like that inside of the orchestration runner in order to accept the key for the thing that you just created?
Where we're at right now, the direction I'm headed, and you can tell me if this is good or not, is we're planning on using Heist. And Heist, there's an issue to extend it to be able to use WinRM, but for now it's just SSH. So you pass Heist SSH credentials into a box. and then it will do all of those things. It'll set up the master minion keys, and then that's it.
Right. So what Heist would be doing at that point is creating.
The minion and then accepting the keys on the master, wherever your master is. And you would tell Heist where your master is. Like you could do it through a local master, or you could do it through a Salt API call, or through Ra's Salt Stack SSE. We have it be possible to do it through all those. That's where I'm at right now.
Trying to think through like the actual logistics of that though. So like Heist, what it effectively does is create a tunnel between, for the purposes of Salt, your master and whatever instances are out there in the world. Right. It can deploy a dissolvable agent on it in order to do things. So at that point, you would be using the Salt dissolvable agent over Heist in order to install Salt, right? So because you have set up the tunnel
and installed Salt, I know where the Salt binary is to run it and configure it for the master.
Interesting. So you're gonna have to like really tie into the master side, or you're gonna have to handle it through events, right?
That'll be a fun question in a week.
Okay, I'm starting to see that I'm asking questions that are right now like in whiteboard land.
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, all I'm trying to do is get Heist to where it can deploy Salt and accept keys on the master. Anything after that is whiteboard land.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm hoping that we can get there by the next Salt Cloud meeting. Have a solid way of deploying Salt on cloud instances. That's my plan.
Awesome. So does anybody have any specific questions about all of these things? I know that Tyler and I probably talked at a high level about some things that people probably have questions about. You know, we've been discussing this for months and months and months now. So if anybody's new to this conversation or has specific questions on how to get started, or anything having to do with existing Salt Cloud or future item cloud concerns, this is your time.
Sure. I was going to say, so with item, how do you actually use that now? So I'm just familiar with, the Salt Master minion, running execution modules on a minion, salt states, that kind of thing. But, it sounds like, so item, it sounds like you guys have obviously broken down kind of all the different, areas into different repos. And then, I don't know, I'm just curious, I guess, like how does one wield and actually use item like at the moment?
So Tyler probably can talk about item AWS, because I know that you're more of an AWS shop, and how to get started with that. But if you wanted like a general, like soup to nuts, we can do all the things type of setup. We could take a look briefly at Item Azure RM, which is Item Resource Manager, Azure Resource Manager for Item. Just poke over here real quick. So in Pop Awesome, there's a link to this. And basically, this is the Microsoft Azure Cloud Provider for Item, right? So you can install, you can go get a free subscription to test this out with through Microsoft, right? They're just going to ask you for a email address and whatnot. How to install it, how to set up your credentials. So in Azure, I generally use a service principal in order to connect. So it requires these 4 pieces of information. You could go over real quickly like how to create a service principal in Azure, and it'll give you the single command or the UI that you need to click through. It's not terribly difficult to create one. But you know, I know that Azure is a new thing for a lot of people because it doesn't have the market share there. But you know, basically, you create this file with your credentials in it. You end up encrypting it with account, which is another POP application, and then you're going to export these environment variables that point to your credentials here, so that it can be used with item. So kind of like setting up your AWS credentials, right? And then it just ends up being YAML from there, right? Like you have a resource group that we're creating here. So this looks like salt. This is the name. This is the path to the item state. You can see that there's multiple dots in there. In salt, you can only have like a file and then a function inside of it, and that's it. So you have a single dot. This in item, we can have many paths under a nested structure, so that we can have multiple dots and keep our code small and coherent. And then we're spinning up a resource group named item in East US, and we're passing it a tag, and it should just do it. Additionally, inside of Pop Awesome, it should point to like some of my blog posts I've done. I really need to get on some newer ones, because I think I wrote a couple in like the 2 dot space for item measure M, and we're about to release 4.0 probably later this week. And it's got a lot of new cool stuff in it, like serverless and containers and things like that that weren't there previous. But this gives like a backstory on why item and how to go forward. And then some of the stuff that's in the README, right? Like, hey, we're installing it, we're setting up authentication. Actually, this is probably old. Yeah, so 2.1 had account, 2.0 does not, but still, it shows you that you can set up a resource group and kind of what a virtual machine would look like. That was in the getting started. This 2.1 update is showing the new way for authentication. So that would be account and setting up multiple credentials in there. I know I'm going through this quickly, but it's all up here to read. And like how to create things again. So in addition to that, we have all of our documentation up on Read the Docs. So there's like getting started guide in here, a quick start for virtual machines. So you can sort of see like, hey, here's the YAML that will spin up things inside of your particular subscription, as long as you have your credentials set up properly. So like this is kind of where the rubber meets the road type of stuff. Should be all you would need to actually spin up CentOS box, right? And item renders everything through a Ginger render prior. So, if you wanted to, put like a Ginger loop around these virtual machines and increment, 6 numbers or something like that, and spin up virtual machine 1 through 6, that's really easy to do, right? So if you're familiar with Salt, you can do all of that, Jinja awesomeness. The only things that you can't do right now are, call your Salt functions that you're used to in order to do some of those things, right? Like, so right now, item doesn't have like an HTTP module, right? So you can't like reach out to a website and get information or something like that. But once all that's integrated, you should be able to do those things. So there should be a fair amount of information between all of those different resources if you're into Azure. And then Tyler, what level of documentation and like getting started stuff do you have for AWS?
That README is really it. Plus anything in the Pop Awesome for all the times that we've talked about it. The documentation is lacking right now, but I am willing to sit down, like you said earlier, for 30 minutes and get you started and talk through any issues you might have, starting with IDEM AWS. If you ping me on community Slack, I'm Akmod, AKM0D.
Cool, sweet. Well, yeah,
Just make a comment in the IDEM Cloud channel. But yeah, I'll sit down with you and do it.
cool. Yeah, no, thanks for that full kind of run through. That paints a pretty good picture.
Nick, is there anything that needs to be tested that we could get like help out, like testing anything or?
Yeah, so I know Tyler's looking for people to test out everything that he's done so far in IDEM AWS. So yeah, again, if you wanted to grab him for a short time period, and go ahead.
There are tests written, but yeah, I would really like other people to run the test because it works on my machine, and I really want to see if, with your credentials, the instructions are clear, if the documentation where it's lacking. I really want to know if you can follow the README on the top of the repo and actually get up started.
Because on our side, I have Steven, Michael, and Dylan are all on our team on the Zoom call here. And so if there's anything, like you need help testing or if there's a small project, maybe that we could take on to get the guys kind of acclimated to, development tasks, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so maybe you guys could set up something to get started with Tyler all at the same time,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And then, in addition to just running the built-in tests, right, that will actually create things and tear it down inside of your infrastructure, getting maybe like a handful of small use cases like, hey, here's me creating a virtual network, here's me creating this resource, by actually like writing the YAML for it, and getting that real world testing out there. I think that would be definitely awesome for that project, and Tyler would definitely appreciate it.
Cool. Tyler, is EKS on the roadmap at all?
Is what?
EKS, the Elastic Kubernetes Service?
No, not yet.
Okay.
It's not currently on our spreadsheet, but I know that that's a thing that people are starting to get a lot of use out of, right? So
yes, I can work with you on how to add it.
Well, I was thinking maybe that would be a good project. So maybe, if we could get something set up and go through, kind of the basics, this week or next week or whenever you have some time, then maybe we could get involved doing some testing and or maybe trying to help create one of those modules.
Yeah, set up if you're in the IDEM Cloud on the community Slack, let's set up just make sure we do that real quick.
All right, let's see here. So I am on the SaltStack community.
Yeah. And there's a channel called IDEM-Cloud.
Browse channels. Okay, I just joined.
Yep.
Perfect. And that's me.
Cool. Got it.
So we can talk there after the meeting and figure out a time that works for everyone.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to discuss?
No.
All right. Well,
I do have one quick question, Nick.
you lied to me.
I know. Well, it just popped in my head earlier. I was going to ask you earlier, but I didn't want to stop you. The account thing, you said that's a pop feature?
Yeah, so it's another pop project that basically plugs into any other pop thing and gives you the ability to define like a YAML file that has credentials in it, and you can encrypt it. And so you have an encrypted file on your file system that can then be read in to your Python application that's a POP app, and then those credentials end up as a dictionary
Gotcha.
that can be used, right? You can really put anything you want in there, but it's really meant for credentials. So just to like cycle back to that real quick, I can create a YAML file that looks like this, right? Where I have like multiple credentials inside of it. So Azure RM as a root node in my YAML would be expected to be used by the Azure RM node in POP. And so account is going to handle like passing that credentials off. And it's going to say, oh, okay, you're running Azure RM. Here's your Azure RM credentials. And then I can select specific profiles, right? So the default profile, it's going to use these credentials for authenticating with whatever subscription. But say I have like another subscription that I need to interface with different credentials or something like that, I can call out, I don't know if I actually show it. Yeah, here, the account profile inside of my YAML. And so I can use that different set of credentials in order to spin up that resource group. And so they should end up in two different subscriptions at that point.
So can I ask you a question? Maybe a silly question. Are you familiar with like HashiCorp Vault?
Yep.
So is this just a salt stack way to do what you would?
It's not meant to be a Vault competitor because it's very local. So Takara is another POP project, and that's much closer to a Vault competitor, although it's really, really early in development, and I don't think it's received much love lately. Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong. So, I wouldn't say that it's ready to quite be called a Vault competitor, but it's much, much closer to the use that you would expect in Vault. Takara uses Shamir secrets and expects the same pathing for secrets that you would use inside of Vault. So I would say that that's probably closer to that.
Okay. But maybe that's a bit of a ways off though.
Well, we can also we have the ability to store your cloud profiles anywhere. Like I wrote a LastPass plugin. Nick wrote another plugin for doing it in, what was yours for, Nick?
In Key Vault. So the bottom line is though that it's really those providers that Tyler's talking about for account are like, hey, my YAML that I would expect on the file system really lives somewhere else, either like physically or logically, right? So I ended up writing two. One I show in the documentation for Item Azure RM because it's for Azure Key Vaults. And so at that point, instead of having like your credentials in a YAML file, it's really key value pairs that are inside of Azure Key Vault secrets. So you're accessing the Key Vault and you're pulling down those key value pairs, and like that's building your little dictionary of key value pairs that is passing off. And then the other one that I wrote was really as a toy to sort of get started with the account backend providers that Tyler developed. And that, what's it called? It's like secret storage or something like that, is the underlying service that like GNOME or KDE, specific flavors of KDE use. When you're using like a Linux desktop and it like pops up and asks for your GPG key password or something like that, like that's basically the back end that I wrote. So you could be running like Item with account and using that secret service back end and it'll like pop up for your password in the UI so that you can say, yes, this application can access my key store, and then it'll pull out your credentials for your clouds and be able to access it. But to me, that's like a different workflow than like secret storage for Vault. Right?
Sure. And I was just curious if that was a different thing.
Yeah, Takara I think is pretty cool, but it hasn't seen much love lately.
How would I find that? You said it's Takara?
Yeah, Takara.
Got it. I see it in the GitHub repo.
Yep. Yeah, I'll link it here for anybody else that. Oh, yeah, Tyler did it.
Got it. Cool. Thanks, guys. That's all I have.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool projects out there on Pop Awesome to take a look at, and they're in like varying states of development. But I think the concept is really cool, and like literally anything that's there, because it's all Pop applications, they can all be merged. So say you write a Pop application for your own internal use to do a thing, and you're like, oh, I need to store credentials for this thing. Instead of writing that yourself, you just merge in account, and then you can take advantage of the features that it has magically. Likewise for like literally anything else. If you're writing an application and you need Azure functionality, if you're writing it in Python using POP, then you could just merge in item Azure RM, and then voila, you have all of that Azure functionality that you need. So I think that like as more POP applications, POP plugins end up being released, I think that the benefits are really going to become evident of living inside of this pluggable architecture where, any one of those things could benefit from the use of another.
Very cool. No, thank you, guys.
Awesome. Well, unless anybody has anything else, I'll wait a couple of ticks. But I think that's probably going to do us for tonight. And you guys make sure to take advantage of Tyler in every way possible. And, definitely for anybody listening or viewing this video after the fact, the SaltStack community Slack is probably the best way to get in touch with any of us, either by popping into the item-cloud channel or into the cloud channel, and can interact with us there. We're all mostly nice. I haven't yelled at too many people, have I, Tyler?
Mostly. For the most part, we're all nice.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for attending tonight, and we'll give you back 11 minutes of your time, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thanks, guys.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Peace.